battle for the mind of North America will be fought in the video arena.
So without further ado, here is Dr. Dennis Modry.
Well, thanks, Vicki, and thank you very much also to all of you for coming out. It's a wonderful crowd this evening, and I think you're going to really enjoy the evening, as about 1,200 people or so last night enjoyed it at the Astoria Banquet Hall in Calgary. It was quite the event, and I can assure you that if this room was much bigger, there would be even more people here. But it's wonderful to see so many of you here, and I'd like to thank the organizers as well for putting on the event tonight. So I'd like to start this way. As you know, the topic is really Alberta sovereignty, but I want to pay a tribute. Bear with me for a second, because this is going to shock you. I want to pay a tribute to our former Prime Minister and the people that voted for him. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, for those of you who don't know who Mahatma Gandhi was, he was a brilliant lawyer in India. He was a colonial nationalist, and he was one of the champions of civil rights and freedom. But in the immortal words of Mahatma Gandhi, here is the tribute to our former PM and the people that voted for him. If an idiot is in power, then those who elected him are well represented. Now, that is not to say that the people in Saskatchewan, Alberta, central British Columbia, and northern British Columbia voted for him, but I draw a distinction because the same people that voted for the first idiot have voted for the new, not necessarily an idiot because he's much smarter than the former one, but he's far more dangerous. So with that, we're going to talk about sovereignty, but I want to take you back to 2003. This is a time in January of 2003 at the annual general meeting in Red Deer. I was having a private conversation with then Premier Ralph Klein. And I said to Ralph, we were very good friends, and I said to Ralph, you know, I think I've got a solution to fix the dysfunctional relationship between Alberta and Ottawa. And he said, you do? And I said, yeah, would you like to hear about it? He said, absolutely. So I said, well, Ralph, if you were the Prime Minister or the President of the sovereign country of Alberta, and Canada came to you and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, would you? And he looked at me with that impish smile, and I'll always remember the words. He said, to ask the question is to know the answer. Of course not. And I said, well, I'm glad you said that, because the corollary is, don't you think you have an ethical, moral, and economic responsibility to Albertans to fix this dysfunctional relationship? And he said, yeah, I guess I do. And I said, well, I'm working on a document that I think will define the algorithm for you to resolve this particular problem. And over the next several months, I drafted the document with input from constitutional lawyers like Jerry Shapur, prominent other professionals and non-professionals, former MLAs such as Ted Morton, and former MPs, believe it or not, Don Mazankowski, who is also a friend of mine. And when I met with Ralph in August of 2003 with the document, was entitled Alberta at the Crossroads, Status Quo, Refederation, Autonomy. In my mind at that time, autonomy meant Alberta sovereignty. And as I went through the key issues of the document, we had a really good discussion for about an hour and a half. The essence of it was leverage. Solving the imbalance in power between Alberta and the federal government. To give leverage so that negotiations could occur on a level playing field. To give Alberta negotiating strength. And the only leverage that absolutely exists to really open and change the Constitution, which is what is required, is a referendum on Alberta sovereignty. Now, what does sovereignty actually really mean? In the simplest of terms, it's really self-governance without external interference. And when we talk about sovereignty, we can think of sovereignty at different levels. Let's start with each one of you. Each one of you has a certain level of sovereignty. And you give up that sovereignty when you are overregulated and controlled. You give up that sovereignty when you are excessively taxed. Because what it means is you don't have the economic wherewithal, because you've ceded it to some level of government. You don't have the economic wherewithal then to purchase the goods and services that you want for yourself and your family. So this is an important point to understand, that particular issue of sovereignty. At the next level, we're talking provincial, for example. Now, you'll remember that the current government in Alberta implemented Bill 1, the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. Why did they call it that? They called it that because the Premier and the MLAs were dissatisfied with the relationship between Alberta and the federal government. The federal government was usurping control that belonged to the province, the province had provincial constitutional control over a number of matters, and the federal government was encroaching on that control. But also there's the excessive taxation that occurs. And I'm going to let Jeff talk about that because he does such a really good job about dealing with the taxes at multiple levels, as does Mitch. But what I want to do now is take you from this point of the discussion on sovereignty and take you to an understanding of why are we in this mess? How did it happen, and what have the consequences been? And I want to take you back now to September 1, 1905. And for those of you who are unsure about that date, that's when Alberta and Saskatchewan were incorporated into Confederation, thanks to the efforts of Sir Clifford Sifton. Now, Sir Clifford Sifton was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. And he was responsible, like I said, for bringing Alberta and Saskatchewan into Confederation. But what he said in 2004 is prescient. And you'll see a picture of him a little bit later that Mitch has in his slideshow. But what he said in 2004, pay attention to this, because this explains why we are in the mess that we're in now. But what he said in 1904 was this, to an audience in Winnipeg, and it's in his book, Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, page 95, for anybody who's interested. So, I quote, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire." Now, Canadian patriots in 1904, remember, were the people in the East. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies, is Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth. So the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to its prosperity, that is, the prosperity of the East. Nowhere is it mentioned about the prosperity of the West. And the outcome of that has been what? We have been a colony to serve the interests of the East ever since we were incorporated into Canada, and nothing has changed. And how has that been manifest? Well, since equalization, the national energy policy, and other federal confiscatory policies, we have contributed over $800 billion to Ottawa, for which we've not received a cent in return. Think about that. The national energy policy itself, why was that implemented? Ostensibly, it was sold to Canadians to shore up services, social services, in poorer regions of the country. But the truth lies in the video that we have of Marc Lalonde, who was the Minister of Finance and the author of the National Energy Policy, when he said, in answer to the question, why did you implement the National Energy Policy, his answer was, because we could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada. So if they thought that then, what do you think now? Very much the same thing. So if we look at, for example, the policies of the federal government, they've been what? They've been anti-Alberta energy, they've been anti-agriculture, they've been anti-resource development, and this has contributed to the fact that we have gone from, in 2006, when Ralph resigned, where we had a $26 billion surplus in our budget. We had the number one bond rating, AAA bond rating in the world. We had the lowest unemployment in history and the highest GDP per capita in the world. But no longer is that the case. We have $100 billion of deficit, of debt in the province of Alberta, and trillions of dollars of debt federally. So this has been hugely mismanaged, and we've missed a tremendous opportunity. Some of you may have seen the research article that came out from the Frontier Center of Public Policy that revealed if we could get our oil and gas to Tidewater to international markets, we would gain an additional $26.5 billion a year in Alberta. So therefore, we're losing $26.5 billion every year because of federal regulations. And then we look at some of the values. And why this is relevant, because these are the sorts of things that are in Mr. Carney's book, entitled values, such as his support for DEI and ESG, his support for a central bank digital currency, his support for censorship, his support for confiscating people's legally owned firearms. So this is in his book, and very likely this is what is coming down the pipe. Now, this brings up the issue of property rights. David Lametti, the former Minister of Justice in Trudeau's government, said a couple years ago, Canadians don't have the right to own property. And he's right. So what do you think about that? If you own your home and you have no debt, just don't pay your taxes and you'll find out who really owns your home, right? So what next? Let's look at the issue of health. Well, the federal government has signed on to the pandemic treaty, the World Health Organization pandemic treaty. So if you like the mandates that occurred consequent to COVID, new mandates may be far more egregious than that. The provincial government, the Premier herself, has said health is a provincial jurisdiction. But you know, the way the system operates, we give $70 billion a year to Ottawa. We get back roughly 27 in health transfers, education transfers, infrastructure transfers, education transfers. What do you think the federal government will do with those transfers if Alberta is not compliant with federal regulations? They will withhold those transfer payments to force compliance. And this is what they've done on multiple occasions to this province and other provinces as well. So it's one thing to have the rhetoric, we're going to stand up for Alberta. It's another thing to actually be able to do it. And we don't have right now the wherewithal to be able to stand up to Ottawa in this fashion. So now let's look at another matter, the issue of economic growth. Are you aware that of all industrialized companies, or countries rather, that Alberta has the lowest growth rate of all industrialized countries? Thanks to what? Federal policies and regulations. As the Premier has pointed out, $500 billion in the last decade or 12 or 14 years has been lost because that investment was concerned about regulations and taxation, and so it just didn't come. That $500 billion, $500 billion, would have percolated through the economy of Alberta and the rest of the country as a matter of trillions of dollars of increased economic activity, multiple trillions of dollars of increased economic activity. It's been lost. But we're facing the same dilemma as we look to the future under this current government. So where do we go from here? What can we do? Well, we've been thinking about this for quite some time. When we started the Alberta Prosperity Society in January of 2022, we had been thinking about a solution prior to that. And the solution we came up with was to develop a society that is educational in nature, nonpartisan, and nonprofit. And we figured it was important to be nonpartisan, nonprofit, and educational because there are multiple independence parties. And if you are one independence party, the way conservatives are, the reason they're conservative is because they, and independent-minded, is because they're not particularly interested in somebody else's view. They have their own independent view about things. And we knew that it wasn't going to be easy to bring together the independence movement, the sovereignty movement, as a party. So we figured, well, we could cut across all education, all partisan politics by being an educational society where we can have this opportunity to educate everybody. And for those of you who haven't looked at the albertaprosperityproject.com website, you should, because there is a wealth of information there that's been developed over the years. So what can we do then? Well, obviously what we've been trying to do as the Alberta Prosperity Project has been to educate the public on the rationale and the merits of Alberta sovereignty. And the way that we intended to do this is to empower the provincial government to be able to negotiate with Ottawa from a position of strength. But we realized negotiating with Ottawa from a position of strength can only come from one activity, and that is for Alberta to become sovereign consequent to a successful referendum on Alberta sovereignty. So the process that we've defined to get us there is based on the Clarity Act. So this defines the legal pathway for Alberta to leave Canada. And the way it starts now is with the Citizens Initiative Act, which was passed into legislation in May of 2022. And that Citizens Initiative Act right now requires us to collect 600,000 signatures on a petition for Alberta sovereignty collected within 90 days. Now, you can realize the impossibility of doing that. So we developed a workaround, and that workaround was, well, here's what we can do to outsmart Jason Kenney, is to let's collect the contact information of 600,000 people. Once we have that number of people's contact information in our database, then we can pose the sovereignty question to Elections Alberta for approval. Then we can send out the canvassers, but now the canvassers will know where to go because we have the contact information, right? That's the workaround. Now, many of you have heard that Bill 54 will reduce the threshold to 10% of those who voted in the previous provincial election. So the number is reduced from 600,000 to 177,000. At present, we already have contact information of a number of people that's already north of the threshold that may be passed into legislation. It is nice to know that, no question about it. We'll know in June if it is proclaimed into law. I believe on May the 15th, second reading will take place on that piece of legislation. Now, if you think about this, though, what is our objective? Our objective is not just to win the petition, it's to win the referendum. So, you know, for example, with 240,000, for example, people who have registered their intent to support a petition on Alberta sovereignty, around that is a certain number of people that will also support the referendum on Alberta sovereignty. If we have several 100,000 people who sign the petition to force a referendum, there's a much bigger number around that 700,000, which gets us closer to the real threshold for the referendum itself, which is going to be something in the order of 1.5 million people voting in favor of Alberta sovereignty on the referendum. Now, the benefits, of course, of Alberta sovereignty are enormous, and you're going to hear some of that from Jeff and Mitch moving forward. So our process then really is to carry on collecting the contact information for people that will support the referendum and support the petition to force the referendum. Then it's going to be up to ostensibly the provincial government to decide on the date of the referendum. We would like to have it sooner rather than later, but we want to have it sooner rather than later knowing that we have an extremely high probability of winning the referendum as well. And so our board of directors will make a decision at some point in the future as to when we'll have the petition or submit the petition to Elections Alberta and then go out and collect the signatures. So this is where we are now, and I'm going to close with a question. And it's important to answer this question by a show of hands, or not a show of hands, depending how you view the question, because there's a corollary question that's most relevant. So let's go back to the question with respect to my conversation with Ralph in 2003. So imagine I'm talking to Ralph Klein right here. You're all Ralph Klein. And I say to you, people, if Alberta was already a sovereign nation and Canada came to us and said we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, by a show of hands, how many people here would want Alberta to join Canada under the current terms and cost of membership? Any hands raised? No. So what's the corollary? It's the same thing that I said to Ralph. Don't you think that you have an obligation to fix this dysfunctional relationship? Do you? Yes. You do. So what are you prepared to do about it? Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. All right. I like that answer. That's a good answer. But here's what you need to do. What you need to do is you need to yourselves not only give us your contact information, but also get as many people as you can, family, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, to also simply go to our website and record their contact information with us. And you can see on the website the number is growing. There's a scale there, and it shows where we are on a regular basis. So this is really important for everybody to understand and what they need to do to help us, because we can win it together, but we can lose it if we're fractured. So thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to the Q&A afterwards.
Thank you, Dennis. So I have another quick question for all of you. How many of you personally feel like you are a sovereign being? None of you? All of you. I hope you all feel like that, because the thing is we actually have to believe this in our heart and our soul to make this happen. That's what's going to keep us glued together and make us, get over some of our differences. And when we disagree on details of how this is going to work and what it's going to look like in the future, we have to be honest. We don't know. But we can take one step at a time every single day and get one more person and get one more person. If we can get our kids here and our grandkids here, that's great. But I know that, our youth, they're busy. They're just trying to keep their heads above water. So it's, I haven't been able to get my two boys out here, but they do agree with me. So I can get them to go online, and I can explain to them why I'm supporting this, and I can get them to go online and sign that petition. And that's really all we need to do, is just make a difference one person at a time. If every single person in our database signed up 2 people, we'd be at 250,000 people, or 750,000 of people. That's just 2 people each, everybody that signed up. And with that, if you understand politics a little bit, if you're in a political party, now this is not a political party. And this is what I love about this organization, is we're grassroots, and we're going to be the engine this time to lead the political party to do what we want them to do. We are going to have the power because we're going to have the numbers. So, but in politics, they say for every membership that you have in a political party, that equals 3 votes. So imagine if we had 750,000 supporters and we translated that times 3. We're going to win this referendum. But we need you every day pushing forward. And there's going to be some bumps. We know there's going to be attacks. We know that this isn't going to be just smooth sailing. Oh, come on. Yeah, I know. But we can do this. And the first step is what I want everyone focused on, is that petition. So, and we need to have volunteers in every area of this province so that when we register that petition, we have people that are going to be out door knocking and grabbing those signatures. Now, there's obviously a commitment and there's obviously sacrifice. But freedom is not free, and we need everyone to be willing to sacrifice just a little bit. So with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And he's full of energy. Love this guy. Probably most of you in this room know who he is, but I'll let you know a little bit about him. He is a lawyer in Alberta here. He has been advocating for First Nations and treaty rights for many, many years. And then during COVID, he took on a new role as being our COVID lawyer. He's got 2 class actions going on right now, one to help the small businesses that went down under the lockdowns, and also another one for the vaccine injured. And, thank you, Jeff, for stepping up and defending those that weren't able to defend themselves. So we love you, and we're very thankful that you're here. So, Jeff Rath, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to say what an honor and a privilege it is to be here in Ponoka this evening. I found out about this event yesterday. Mitch said, "Hey, Jeff, can you make it to Ponoka tomorrow?" I said, "Hell yeah, that's my country." I love Ponoka. I love the Ponoka Stampede, and I love the people that live up here. So anyway, thank you all for coming out to listen to me today. So what I wanted to talk to everybody about is a very simple concept, and it's one I think that all of us feel very deeply in our hearts. And that concept is that Canada has become an existential, immediate threat to Alberta and Albertans. For the last 10 years, and now it's going to continue today, that the government of Canada has literally been trying to destroy the lives and livelihoods of everyone in this province and everyone in this room. It has been completely deliberate. It has been done with malice aforethought, and it has been continuing and ongoing. So our new Prime Minister, and again, much like Dennis, I want to echo his remarks. I want to thank our friends in Ontario and Quebec for joining together in this last election and voting Alberta out of Canada. So to be clear, we're not separating from Canada. In this last election, Canada finally separated from us once and for all. So, and that's basically the message that we're putting forward. So Ontario and Quebec have chosen their divorce lawyer. His name is Marxist Carney, and we will be dealing with him over the next year, getting ready and organizing to have every citizen in this province come together and vote in a citizens' referendum to finally vote Alberta out of Canada and out from underneath the colonial oppression that we have been suffering under since the inception of this province in 1905. And when I say that Canada is an existential threat to Alberta, we just have to look at what Mr. Carney did this afternoon, claiming that his new cabinet was going to be a new face of the Canadian government and that he was putting in new ministers to signal that there was going to be a change in governance in Ottawa and that we should all be very happy with this change. Well, who did he put in as the so-called Minister of the Environment and Climate Change? A woman by the name of Julie Dabroussin. Julie Dabroussin is a 51-year-old protege of the former Gibbering Gibault, who was the former minister of I Want to Kill Alberta and Shut Down the Tar Sands. And her stated public positions with regard to the Alberta oil industry are the same as the idiotic Gibbering Gibault, which is to shut down the Alberta oil sands by no later than 2035. So when I say that these people are an existential threat to Alberta and an existential threat to our way of life that is pressing and immediate, I am not exaggerating even one little bit. So all of us, we have an opportunity now, and the opportunity from my perspective comes recently from President Trump and his joint address to the houses of Congress in the United States, when he stood up and said he was going to support self-determination for Greenland. I can assure everyone in this room that we've taken a trip to Washington on a preliminary basis in preparation for further meetings, and we have been assured by the Trump administration that they are wildly enthusiastic and supportive of Alberta independence. So certainly, with that in our back pockets, and with the industry, the energy, and the industriousness of the citizens of this province and the people of this county, we can all come together and work together over the next number of months to do what we need to do to build this path forward to get Alberta out of Canada. We have a very integrated plan moving forward, which I'll share with you in a bit. But before we get into that, and I've touched on some of the grievances that we all have with Confederation and how broken it is, right? We live in a country where 3 maritime provinces that don't even have half of the population of Alberta, that being Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, collectively have 24 seats in the Canadian Senate to the 6 seats that Alberta has in the Canadian Senate. Think about that for a minute. The collective population of Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick are approximately 2.1 million. They're not even half of the population of Newfoundland. Of Alberta. Now let's throw Newfoundland in on top. I haven't checked Newfoundland's population recently, but it can't be more than 250,000. So, let's throw Newfoundland on top. So there's still not even half of the population of Alberta. Newfoundland has the same number of Senate seats of Alberta, 6. So between Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, and New Brunswick, they have 30 Senate seats to Alberta's 6 Senate seats, and they have more seats on the Supreme Court of Canada than Alberta has. And with Ontario and Quebec having 3 each, is it any wonder when any division of powers issue goes to the Supreme Court, Alberta takes it in the teeth? And I want to talk a little bit about some of the foolishness that we've been living under, as one of the many reasons that we need to get the hell out of Canada. We have people that live in Eastern Canada that literally believe in politicians who engage in the same level of magical thinking as the ancient Mayan culture. Specifically, they think that by taking a knife and cutting out the hearts of working men and women in Alberta through excessive taxation on our fuel, on our home heating, on everything that we do, they can change the goddamn weather in the same way that the Mayans thought that human sacrifice would make it rain. This is a level of idiocy and a level of magical thinking from politicians elected in Eastern Canada, so completely divorced from the reality of living in Alberta, that makes our continued existence within this so-called country no longer tenable in any way, shape, or form. And again, I don't want to spend the evening focusing on grievances and how stupid people like Doug Ford or the gibbering Gibault are. I mean, we all know they're dumb as a sack of rocks, right? All we had to do was go back a couple of months ago when the Liberals and Doug Ford started the phony tariff war to get Doug Ford reelected in Ontario and to get Mark Carney elected as Prime Minister of Canada. And at the start of this phony tariff war, the idiot buffoon Doug Ford jumps up and down and gets red in the face and so angry because the Americans are going to put taxes on, goods coming out of Ontario. And what's his solution? I'm going to cut off Alberta oil to the United States. I'm going to show them, ha, ha, ha. And then somebody goes, hey, Doug, shh, quiet. All of Ontario's oil actually leaves Alberta, goes through Line 5, down to Line 9, and then back into Ontario. So you're actually cutting off your own oil. Better ixnay on the oil nay, shh, right? So then he goes, okay, now I'm going to cut off Saskatchewan's potash. I'll teach those American farmers their crops are going to rot in the fields. They're not going to have any fertilizer this year. I'm going to show them. Then somebody goes, Doug, that's verging on an act of war, along with your stupid idea of flipping the switch and cutting off power to the northeastern United States. That's not going to fly, right? But again, notice what went on during all of this. At no point did Doug Ford say, I'm going to teach the Americans a lesson on the integration of the North American auto industry. I'm going to shut down Ontario parts plants for a week and completely disrupt the supply chain for vehicle manufacture across the states. No, his first go-to is let's kick the crap out of Albertans by shutting their province down. Then that didn't work, so then he goes after Saskatchewan. I mean, that's exactly the type of governance that we've been living under, as Dr. Modry pointed out, since 1905, when Clifford Sifton basically said that we were going to be the milk cow of Canada, and they would get all the milk and the cream and leave us with nothing other than the hard work and the toil that goes along with it. That's the country that we used to live in, and quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, that we don't need to feel any nostalgia for. I mean, I stopped feeling any love or nostalgia for Canada the day they drugged my friend Tamara Leach across this country in leg irons and hauled her through the Ottawa airport in a prisoner's chair, chained to the chair like she was Hannibal Lecter on a goddamn mischief charge where, as far as I could see from people that were there, Tamara's main role during the convoy protest, the peaceful protest in Ottawa, was to make sure that people, excuse me for that, and I do apologize, was to make sure that people were not blocking traffic, that people were behaving, that they were following the rules that had been laid down, and her reward for that was to be put in manacles and drug across the country like she was Hannibal Lecter. I mean, this is not a country that I grew up in. So I don't feel that we have any need to have nostalgia for Canada. The other thing, though, I want everybody to internalize, and this is kind of a funny thing because all of the Federalists that attack us, and the only thing they have to sell us is fear. What are you going to do for a passport? It's like, hey, dummy, right? We don't lose our Canadian passports when Canada or when Alberta becomes an independent country. We will always remain citizens of Canada, whether we like it or not, because we were born as Canadians. We continue to be Canadian citizens after independence, right? And like Mike Myers, who came up to tell us all elbows up, Little Mikey has 3 passports. He has a UK passport, he has a British passport, and he has an American or Canadian passport and an American passport. So he's doesn't have dual citizenship. He has tri-citizenship. Mark Carney, we don't even know how many passports he has. He has an Irish passport, he has a UK passport, he has a European passport, he has a Canadian passport. So all of these people that are being told that, oh my goodness, if you vote yourselves out of Canada, you're not going to be Canadians anymore and you're going to lose your passports. Oh, and the pensions, that's my favorite. You're going to lose your CPP. You're not losing your CPP. CPP is a legal obligation that has to be paid. Whether the pension plan is repatriated to Alberta as it should be and taken out of the management of people on Bay Street that are using it for investments in Ontario and Quebec instead of investing it in Alberta, that's for another day, and I think that's something that that Mitch will speak to. But nobody loses their CPP. If you live in Florida and you're retired to Florida, you get your CPP in Florida, you get your CPP in Costa Rica, you get it in Portugal. Wherever you live abroad, anywhere from Canada, you're still entitled to your pension, you still get your pension. The other thing is, moving on from that, think about what Alberta sends to Eastern Canada every year. So every year, and internalize this number, $70 billion a year leaves the province of Alberta to go to Ottawa to be filtered through a grotesque federal bureaucracy that has doubled in size since the advent of Justin Trudeau. So it's filtered through this massive bureaucracy. And by the way, when somebody first told me this, I couldn't believe it. Filtered through the CRA, which now has more tax collectors than we have soldiers in the Canadian Army. I had to look it up. 65,000 tax collectors. We have less than a division of combat troops left in the Canadian Army, which is less than 10,000 men and women that can actually go to war and fight a war. Is all that's left in the Canadian Army. So we got about 6.5 times more tax collectors in Canada than we have soldiers. Think about that, right? So it gets filtered through this grotesque federal bureaucracy. And then, of course, there's all the money that gets skimmed off the top for projects like Justin Trudeau's electric choo-choo train from Montreal to Toronto, $15 billion a year to Quebec for so-called equalization, all the money to the Maritimes, Newfoundland, Ontario, everyone else. And out of that $70 billion, Alberta only gets $30 billion of it back in so-called federal services, right? And again, we don't know what a lot of those services are, like tax collection, right? We already understand that there's not much left of a Canadian Army, so I'm sure we don't get much by way of national defense. Certainly Albertans don't have any coast, so we don't get any benefit from the Coast Guard, the Navy, all these types of things, right? So these so-called services that Albertans get back are the smallest portion of the money that gets sucked out of this province every year for the benefit of everyone else. And of course, Quebec laughingly takes all of our money, has gold-plated social service programs. All their apprentices are paid a salary while they go to school and while they apprentice. We don't have programs like that in Alberta. We can't afford them because $15 billion a year goes to Quebec. So Quebec gets to run surplus budgets because they cook their books by keeping all their hydro revenue off the books by claiming this is Crown Corporation revenue. So all the money they make from Hydro-Quebec doesn't go on their books. And they have $15 billion of our money running surplus budgets while we have to borrow money to hire our doctors, our nurses, our teachers, our firemen, our policemen, our paramedics, all of our government services, our roads. We have to borrow money because we are being sucked dry by all of these people in Eastern Canada that benefit from our work, our resources, and our labor. And of course, the whole point of voting Alberta out of Canada is for the benefits that are going to accrue. It's just not that we're no longer going to be treated as the colonial serfs of Canada, having our resources and our labor taken for granted, but there are very positive, tangible benefits that will flow immediately upon independence. First one, No more federal law or regulation will apply in Alberta other than on a transitional basis until adopted by the new government of Alberta under a new Alberta Constitution. So things like the criminal code will still apply. The basic laws of Canada that make sense will still apply, but we're going to be out of the Paris Climate Accord. There's going to be no greenhouse gas and carbon taxes that apply in Alberta. Well, we're on the subject of taxes. No more federal income tax. No, think about that. No more federal income tax. No more carbon tax. No more GST. No more capital gains tax. No more federal corporate tax. No more excise tax on fuel. No more import taxes. Here's another fun one. No more federal tariffs on U.S. goods coming into Alberta. So these are the tangible benefits that will arise upon Alberta independence. So, while we're dealing with, I call it the courtship of Danielle Smith. Well, Mark Carney, after years of abusing Alberta by giving Trudeau advice that amounts to continually punching us in the face over and over and over again, now wants to say he's sorry. And he wants to come to Alberta with a little box of chocolates and offer us some candy. So we'll give you some mega projects. We'll give you some other things that down the line, 4 or 5 years from now, if we haven't been lying to through our teeth to you today, which we've done for years, maybe you'll have some economic returns for Alberta. Well, I can tell you there is not a thing that Mark Carney can offer Danielle Smith that will provide the immediate value to everybody in this room as a complete cessation of all federal jurisdiction over our lives and a complete cessation of all ability of the federal government to levy taxes on anybody in this room. So I would like everybody to really internalize that and think about how much better your lives are going to be. In effect, the referendum question, and for those people that haven't seen it, I'll hold it up briefly so everybody can see what it says. It says, do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada, yes or no? Yes. Exactly. So that question, just so you know, was drafted by for people that, some of the Federalists now, they're all trying to teach us grammar. Oh, that question is not grammatically correct. Oh, no, that question is unclear because there's 2 parts to the question. Well, just in case anybody wanted to know, that question was drafted by Keith Wilson and I. He's also a very capable lawyer. Both of us had the Clarity Act open in front of us at paragraph 1, sub D, sub 4, which says, for a referendum question to have a province leave Canada be lawful under the law of Canada, the question shall clearly state that the province shall become a country and cease to be a province of Canada. So that question is drafted 100% clearly from the federal legislation that they say will govern the independence process and sets out the process by which Alberta will leave Canada. So for all the Federalists out there that are suggesting somehow or other that we don't know grammar or that somehow or other that question is unclear, my advice to them is that not only is that question as clear as a heart attack, that question is drafted in complete conformity with the legislation that they say will govern the independence process of Alberta. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. The next thing that I wanted to touch on was, some of the things that we're dealing with in this province. Mitch and I have been taking a little bit of heat lately because they've been saying that we've been unduly critical of Premier Smith. So I want to say categorically that we are very grateful to Premier Smith for doing what she promised to do at the APP leader debate several years ago, when she promised that she was going to enact legislation to lower the bar on the Citizens Initiative Act from the $600,000 previously set by Jason Kenney, to a much lower standard. So promises made, promises kept. Thank you, Danielle. We appreciate it. On the other hand, we have people in and around Danielle Smith that want to play games with our referendum and with our referendum question. She has advisors and people that have a vested interest in the federal status quo. They don't want to see things change. They don't want to see a new constitution in Alberta. They don't want to lose any power. They hate the idea that a room full of people like this should be able to tell government what to do, as opposed to government coming here and telling you what to do. Right? So that's kind of what we're up against. So one of the things that they're talking about doing is trying to water down our nice, clear, unequivocal question on independence by, after having all the what next panels this summer, then pulling out of that a bunch of referendum questions, which Premier Smith already has the legislative power to enact, specifically an Alberta pension plan, which she should have enacted 2 years ago, an Alberta police force, which she could have enacted 2 years ago. She's going to put those as referendum questions, or thinks that she should be putting those as referendum questions on a ballot at the same time as we are seeking a clean answer to a clean question. That's where the ambiguity comes in, and that's where they are trying to muddle and mix the issues and confuse the issues with regard to Alberta independence. All of you that are involved politically, all of you that are in contact with your MLAs, all of you that have Danielle Smith's email address and so on, need to tell her unequivocally no. This is not appropriate. We need a standalone referendum with a standalone question so that Albertans can answer this question as free, sovereign citizens of this province without any political games being played and any interference.
Right on.
And that's not to say that we don't, I have nothing but respect for Premier Smith. I actually quite like Premier Smith on a personal basis. I think she's been doing a very, very good job under very difficult circumstances, with all the Kenny holdovers in her cabinet constantly threatening to cause problems for her if she flips over too many rocks left over from the COVID period and actually tries to hold any of them to account for all of the lousy things they did to us during the COVID years. So, you know, she's had her challenges to deal with. She still has those people in her cabinet that she still has to deal with. But I want to say unequivocally, none of those people are on our side. And all of them, like Jason Kenney, are everything that's wrong with politics in this province. You know, they all are people that have aspirations. I saw Travis Taves came out with another article, you know, the other day, trying to say that, you know, Alberta would be better off within Canada. Well, obviously, Travis Taves might have been our finance minister, but he sure as hell doesn't know how to do math. Right? You know, he thinks somehow or other that whatever little goodies Marxist Carney can give to Danielle during their courtship should be more than enough to satisfy us, as opposed to internalizing all of the benefits that are going to flow to everybody when we completely end all federal regulation and all federal taxation of the citizens of Alberta. And on that note, and again, I've been told by people I shouldn't do this because Mr. Poilievre is very popular in Alberta, so you shouldn't say anything bad about him. But you know, I do need to say, Pierre Poilievre came out very strongly today saying that he does not support separatism in Alberta, and he's very opposed to separatism in Alberta because Canada should stay united as a country. Well, that's exactly what's wrong with our country. And why it is that we cannot keep doing the same stupid thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. That's exactly what federalism is now. We elected a prime minister from Alberta. His name was Stephen Harper. What did he do to change the structure of Canadian federalism? Nothing. And why did he do nothing? Because the minute they get elected, they're all beholden to Quebec and need to get elected in Quebec to stay in power, right? So therefore, they will never do anything for Alberta, especially stop all federal taxes and money leaving Alberta to go to Quebec every year while we have to borrow money to make ends meet in this province. And Pierre Poilievre is exactly the same way. He's opposed to Alberta separation. Why? Because he wants to be Prime Minister of Canada. He wants to be the boss of us. right? But he's going to say, oh, it's okay though. When I have you under my thumb will be a lot nicer. I might wiggle it back and forth from time to time. I might give you a little massage and make you feel better about being under my thumb. But we're still under his thumb and we don't want it. So anyway, I think on that note, I've said all I needed to say. I think I've offended all of the people I need to offend. I really do apologize to anybody where I did blaspheme this evening and took the Lord's name in vain. I ask your forgiveness and stand humbly before you and say that I'll try not to do that again. I apologize. And on that, I would now like to turn it over to my good friend, Mitch Sylvestre, to close off the evening. And again, I want to say what a pleasure and what an honor it's been for me to be able to come here and speak to you. I love my fellow Albertans, and I love being an Albertan, and thank you very much for listening to me tonight.
Wow, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Please sign up with APP. That's what you need to do. I've got a story for you before I start. I coached hockey for 25 years, and I had some really exceptional kids along the way. But one particular child stands out, and I'm going to explain this to you. He was a native boy, had no dad, and his mom was taking him to hockey and driving him around all over the place, but this child was a very good hockey player. I was coaching him in Pee Wee, which is the best Pee Wee level in Alberta at the time, and he was a dominant hockey player. And I said to him, I called his mom, and I said, bring that boy into the store, and I'm going to give that boy a hand. So she came into the store with him and his older brother, Michael. And they were sitting beside me, and I said, Dallas, you're a good enough hockey player to play anywhere you choose to play. That's how good this kid was. And there's 3 or 4 NHL hockey players from Bonnyville that were not as good as him as a 12-year-old. So anyway, I said to him, I said, Dallas, I will pay your way to hockey schools and whatever it's going to take for you to get to the next level. And he was sitting there with his brother. His brother was also a good hockey player. So Dallas said to me, yes, I'd appreciate that. So I called a friend who was coaching the Golden Bears, a boy from Bonnyville. But his brother sat there and listened to the whole thing. And he said, Mitch, what about me? I said, well, Michael, are you ready to do the work? Because, this is going to take a lot of work. It takes thousands and thousands of hours to become an elite athlete, no matter what you do. So are you ready to do the work? He said, yes. I said, so I'm going to ask you a question. When are you going to start? He said, right now. And guess what? I bought his way to a hockey camp. The boy ended up playing junior hockey, and he became a good hockey player. But the whole point of it is that that's where we are right now. We have to start right now. We have no choice. We're living a very good life right now for most of us. And understand, that is not going to continue. Their program, they've shown us the last 10, 12 years that our standard of living is going down, 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 and our kids can't afford houses. So if we think that this is going to continue to stay the same, you're all sadly mistaken. They're trying to break us. And they're doing it on purpose, consciously doing this. So just understand what's happening. I just want you to also understand that this project is called the Alberta Prosperity Project, so that's what we're talking about. This is all about money. This whole thing is about money. Them taking money away from us, them taking power away from us, then by taking money away from us, they take away the ability for us to live a good life. And eventually, that's the way it's going to be. So here's another thing. Ezra Levant had an event yesterday that I was made aware of just a little while ago in the parking lot. And apparently they're taking signatures. Why is Ezra Levant taking signatures? I'm an Ezra fan. I was an Ezra fan until 2 hours ago. Here's the deal. They're taking signatures so that you think that you're signing up with us. All the people in the room are going to pad his list, his mailing list. They're going to ask them for money, and they're not going to get a thing done. What we do is we're selflessly trying to get us out of Canada by having your address and your name so that we can find you when it comes time to take the signature so we can put the referendum into place. By signing another place, what you're doing is you're thinking, oh, well, I've signed this and I don't have to do it. And it's exactly wrong. We need you to sign with Alberta Prosperity Project. We're the people that are going to get this done. We have 240,000 signatures. We're miles ahead of everybody else, and nobody's going to catch us. Now, just understand, it was brought up a little bit earlier, we can trigger that referendum right now. Right now. We're in position to be able to do that. And it was made very clear to everybody that we're not going to do that until we're ready to win. So just understand something. Our democracy is under attack. We're not just talking about our finances. Our democracy, our entire way of life is under attack. And I'm going to go into that here right away, but just please understand that we are in trouble. This is not normal. What's happening here, I've been in Canada for a long, long time, and I totally understand that what's going on right now is something that I would never imagined even 10 or 15 years ago. So if you're not able to understand what's going on out there, then you just have to stop and think about what it was like before and think about what it is now and then see, is this normal? Another thing, I just want to address another thing before I get to the slides. Everybody says to us, we have no leader for the grassroots movement. Well, actually, we do. The people of Alberta. We're going to turn the pyramid upside down. Right? I've been asked this question multiple times in press conferences all over the place. Who's going to lead this project? I said the people of Alberta are going to lead this. They're the people that are going to have to do it ultimately anyway. You're going to have to take responsibility. We saw in the last election that we're all hoping for Poilievre to win. I know I was. It would have made my life a hell of a lot easier. The gun laws would have changed. I'm a gun dealer, by the way. I sell sporting goods, but I sell guns. So that would have all changed. It would have been way easier for me, good for business. He'd have probably brought the laws back to where they were before. More on that later. But what happened is Carney won a fourth Liberal term, first time ever, 4 in a row. And I'm sitting there and wondering, who the hell voted for those guys? It's impossible for that to happen, in my mind. So here's what we're faced with. We're faced on understanding that every 4 years, we're going to be wondering if another Liberal government is going to come in and undo everything that the Conservative government that we just had in has done. And am I the only guy in the room that sees that or that understands that? So that's exactly what's going on there. All right, we'll get started over here. All right, so these are my people. These are the people that I bring to the AGM every year. We bring more people from Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul to the AGM than any CA. But what we do is we understand that we have to participate in our democracy. We cannot not do that anymore. We have not got the luxury anymore. And I'm not going to pretend that up until 3 years ago that I didn't do the very same thing. But now it's go time. It's too late. Now we have to stop and we have to realize what we have to do. Now I'm going to say this for the first time, and I just want you to understand. I'm going to say it again, but I don't want to bore you, but it's very important. You all have people that you can sign into the Alberta Prosperity Project, every one of you. Every one of you has a brother, sister, aunt, uncle, low-hanging fruit's what I call them. But if you talk to them and they're not on our list, they're of absolutely no use to us. Because here's our problem. We want to win the referendum, but we need them all on the list to understand who's on our side. And then we have to be able to go knock on the door to say, hey, are you going to sign this and support us? And if you're not going to sign to support us, well, we're not going to talk to you anymore. But that's not true. But at any rate, what I'm saying is we need to know who they are. They can't just support us and we're going to stand there and guess that we have 600,000 supporters, and when it comes to election day, we're going to lose the one and last and only ever chance that we will ever have at this. We will never have this opportunity again. I want you to all be very aware that we will never have another chance. All right, so my people, we had 335 people go to the AGM last year to vote for Premier Smith based on the Bill of Rights. I went around the province. I've been doing this for a year. I've been going around the province to many, many events. And everywhere I go, I say, have you gone to the AGM? You need to go to the AGM to participate in your politics. You will be able to vote on policy. You'll be able to vote on governance. We will turn the pyramid upside down. We will give direction to government, and they will listen to us. Well, they don't listen, but we do vote on policy, and we do vote on governance. How many people here went to the AGM last year? Oh, look at you. Good. Perfect. So you saw us there. So we brought to the floor the Bill of Rights, and in it was the right to bear arms. So I'm just going to take an example of what didn't happen. So when I was promoting everybody going to the AGM last year, I said, well, the Bill of Rights is a very big part of this, because then it'll give us the opportunity to fix all the harms that happened during COVID. So we were going to build, and we built a brand new Bill of Rights. We had passed the motion the year before in governance, in policy, I'm sorry. And then we went back after it when the Premier came to Bonnyville, and she had a conversation with me, and I was one of the leaders of the grassroots movement at the time and still am. And I said to her in a private conversation, I said, Premier, people are not very happy with you right now. And she said, well, why is everybody so angry? I said, because we see things that have happened during COVID, and we'd like to have them fixed, and things are not moving fast enough. I said, but there's a silver bullet here, so maybe what we should do is we should introduce a new Bill of Rights, which we had been working on. And she said, well, and I said, that's just a choice. And then she went out on the floor 20 minutes later, and she said, we're going to work on the new Bill of Rights. She told the people. So I went around the province, did 30, 40 town halls, told everybody, got the National Firearms Association to side with me, and I said, okay, we've got to have the right to bear arms. It's very important. And we brought a whole bunch of people to the AGM. So then we took it to the floor, which had never happened before. A motion had never been won on the floor of the AGM before. We went, we presented, we won with a supermajority, like a supermajority. 95% of the people in the room, they tried to change the time they did not try, they did. It was scheduled at 2, and then they ran it at noon, and everybody was gone for lunch. Why would they do that? I just don't understand it. I never understood it at the time. I still don't understand it. So we move forward, and then they passed Bill 24, and in it is you have the right to bear arms in accordance to the law. So the law of what? The law of Canada. So I freaked out. I phoned them and I said, what's going on with this? I don't support that. I can't support that. We have less rights than we had coming in. Because 9213 says, as Jeff alluded to, we have the right over property and civil rights in Alberta, right? So now we no longer have that because it says in our law that it's in accordance to the law, which is federal law, which allows them the ability to come and get our guns. Okay? So that's where we were with that. So just understand what's at stake here, ladies and gentlemen. We have the richest country in the world right here in Alberta. No doubt in my mind. Nobody will match us. We'll have the highest GDP in the world. Right now, we're not gaining ground, as Dr. Modry alluded to. We're not productive. Well, that's not Albertans. We're productive. We work hard. We get things done. And with the resources that are here, we can definitely make this work. 1.3 trillion barrels of oil, natural gas that we can burn off because we have so much of it, all the agriculture, all the forests, all the minerals, everything. Everything is here. There's not another country in the world that has what we have. The Arabs don't have anywhere near what we have. They're way richer than us. The Americans don't have water. We have all manner of stuff that they don't have. And we have no people, which is also a good thing. All right, our Prime Minister said in 2015, if you can imagine him saying this, I cannot. There is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state, and a post-national state is what we're getting. A globalist agenda for no borders, massive immigration. That's what a post-national state is. And what it does, it takes away the identity of the people that live in the region. And it's a conscious effort to do that. And we're a very conservative region, and we don't align with their politics. So just understand, that's not an accident. And here's our gentleman that the boys both alluded to here, Clifford Sifton, and I'm not going to repeat that. You can read it. But here's the deal. In 1905, they said, who are the people that he alluded to that were going to come and settle the West and do the work? They were Eastern European peasants, people from, and my grandpa and grandma came down there from Quebec. They came down here. They broke the land by hand. They left everything behind and took the chance on a big dream of things getting better. So I'm going to ask you right now to do the same thing. You're going to have to take a chance on what we're proposing to you because you have to look at the real picture and see what the future could be for you. Because that's what our grandparents did, that's what our forefathers did, and they worked really hard. And I know and I understand this with what we have, that if we do the very same thing, that we'll be very, very, very happy at the end of it. And I'm not saying that it won't come with growing pains, because I remember my grandfather telling me that they cleared that bush by hand for a year or two until they could afford a team of horses. And then once that team of horses came into play and they could pull out the stumps with the horses, like I can imagine, have you ever pulled out a stump? Now just imagine doing it all day, every day, so that you can feed your family. So that was the deal. My aunts used to go shoot bush partridges every night for supper. They handled the guns better than the boys. But anyways, screw the West, we'll take the rest. That's when this started. This started when, like Dr. Modry alluded to, they did not want to cede power to us. Well, what happened to us is that we weren't only farmers, we found oil. Like, the Beverly Hillbillies. You guys remember that? Where he pulls that trigger and the oil comes oozing out of the ground. Well, it would be like going to the Athabasca River. We can actually reach into the sand and pull the oil out of the sand because that's where it is. Like, there's so much of it. So that was the problem. So the problem is that all of a sudden we became rich. And we have become rich. Lots of farm boys, lots of friends that I worked with, worked the oil patch. They're right on the edge of it. Bonneville, if you know where Bonneville is, we produce 35% of Alberta's oil. So we're right there. All those Ukrainian and French farm boys that worked really hard all their lives, picking rocks, throwing bales and all that kind of stuff, all of a sudden had the opportunity to run vac trucks and all manner of stuff. And what happened is they made a lot of money. Bonneville was the highest per capita millionaires in the world for a while. Actually, no lie. So Mark Lalonde admitted, and I remember this, I literally remember, I was 25 years old at the time, when he said, we don't want the power shift to go from Ottawa to Alberta. So what do we have to do? We have to make Alberta poorer. So they started transfer payments. Okay? That's what happens. That is a conscious thing. They did want to make Alberta poorer. Just understand, that is not an accident. That is a very conscious effort. Everything is working exactly the way they designed it to work. Take advantage of Alberta. Here's a net contribution. Dennis alluded to that. Just look at who the contributors are. Alberta, way up there. BC less, Ontario less, and everybody else is a net taker. What do you think the odds are that they're going to vote to change the Constitution? 0. Canada pension, okay. I've done 100 pension meetings. Jeff alluded to the fact that you're not going to lose your pension, that it transfers, it'll follow you everywhere. Old age security is part of that. So just be aware. Here's the deal. I'll just give you some numbers here quickly. We pay $9 billion a year to Canada Pension. Our seniors collect $6 billion a year. We have a $3 billion surplus. It's annual. So we pay more than we collect. I say in my presentations, we could give our seniors a 40% increase in pay right now and not change a thing. And we'd still have the money to do it. There's another component to that if you overpay, in the CPP Act, Ontario, back in the day, when they thought that they were going to be the major contributor, said that we want to protect ourselves from having to pay for everybody else. So there's something in there that says that if you overcontribute, the money goes into a pile for you, for Alberta, or for Ontario, or whoever that is. So by overcontributing the way we overcontribute, plus interest, the Government of Canada owes Alberta $335 billion, plus $3 billion, plus $3 billion for the last 2 years, plus interest on that money. So we also alluded to the fact that we're $100 billion in debt. So that would be 4 times more in one lump sum that we have, that more than we owe. So I asked the Premier on Thursday night in Bonneville, I said to the Premier, Premier, why do we not call the pension plan back? And she said, well, we don't have a number. I said, but because they're bucking us on the $335 billion, of course, and also, just FYI, they have it in their asset pile, not in our asset pile. It should be in Alberta's asset pile, but they have it in the federal government's asset pile. So we're not sure that exists, that money actually exists, or where they invested it, and what it's actually really worth, because that investment might be underwater. We don't know that. But the whole thing of it is that we've asked them for a number multiple times. The number hasn't come. So I said to the Premier, why don't you sue them? We want a number. So what would we say if they came back with $250 billion? So, we don't owe you 380, but we'll give you 250. Thank you. Yeah. I would say thank you too. Because understand that at the current rate where we're at, that's 40 years of pension payments without us paying another penny in. And that's not even including the interest that would make. So that would be security forever. But just saying, that's where we're at with that file. And that's the thing where Jeff and I say we're criticizing the government. Well, Danielle actually said this is a no-brainer. And I brought that up to her. I said, so why are you not bringing that here? Because everybody in the room understands after 3 minutes that is a no-brainer. You're thinking in your head, oh, there must be more to it. Well, there actually isn't. This is the real deal. They don't want us to have it. Why? It's consistent with the theme that they want Alberta to stay broke. That's the reason. That's what's going on. They don't want you to have money because if you have money, you're independent, you can afford to educate yourself, and you can afford to do things that they don't want you to do. And I know that's hard to believe because I would have never believed it till just recently. Less than a month ago, Jeff had to talk me into this whole project, and he literally did. So I'm just saying. So you can blame him for all this. So just in case you forget what the Liberals did to us in 10 years, I want to just remind you, just so you understand how bad this actually is. All right, the world is demanding more oil every day. It's not like people are not using oil or burning oil. We need oil to stay warm. We need oil to run our cars, all the rest of it. More in demand every day. It's supposed to go up, whatever, how many, 10% or whatever. It's growing every day. So there's more people, more uses for oil. They're killing our investment. You know that. So just understand what that means when there's $500 billion to leave the province and our people don't get to earn it and spend it and it doesn't go around into our businesses and our kids cannot afford a home. There's people in this room that understand that when they graduated from high school, there's people in their classes that were buying homes. I'm one of that. I remember that very clearly. Back in those days, I laugh because there was no birth control back when I was in high school, so there was lots of people having to get married at 18 years old. And it was all right because they could buy a house, so it all worked out fine. All right. So this is one of the projects that they canceled. They canceled a project in Kitimat that was going to ship natural gas around the world. Now understand this. Germany and Japan and Greece came to Alberta, or came to Canada, actually to Alberta, with their hat in their hand and begged us to sell them natural gas. And we said no. Justin Trudeau said that's not in our plan. Well, it isn't in their plan if their plan is to make us broke. So just understand that we are not ever going to be in a position to control this again. We're in a position to control this now. So just understand that we have to pay attention to what they're actually doing. Because no matter how you slice it, if somebody tells you something and does the exact opposite, what part of that are you going to believe? Bill C-69 blocks pipelines, tanker ban, on the West Coast only, by the way. Right? So they can float in the East, but they'll sink in the West, apparently. Yes, of course. 500,000 barrels a day. Carbon tax, we know that. We did that. We'll go back. Bill C-293. Is there farmers in the room? Okay, just understand this. They hate you. They hate you. If they didn't hate you, they wouldn't put a carbon tax on you, and they definitely wouldn't do this. So Bill C-293 says that in the case of the next pandemic, which is slated to be the avian flu, they're going to be able to come to your farm and seize your land and your herd. So why would you pass a law that says that? How destructive is that? And that's happening. That's happening right now. This law, C-293 is out there. At the AGM, for those of you that were there, the provincial government said they don't know what they're doing, the agriculture minister. I got on the stage the other day. I said, I absolutely know what they're doing. They're doing this on purpose. So just understand the level of evil that's there and how they think of us. Jeff alluded to COVID. I'm going to say one word about COVID because it pisses everybody off, pardon me, but it does. So here's the thing. Just understand that happened. And just understand that who was in power when it happened. And who brought that down on top of us. That's what I'm going to say over that. All right. The boys alluded to the taxes. Let's have a list. Carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate tax, goods and services tax, excise tax, fuel excise tax, alcohol, tobacco, cannabis tax, excise duties, customs duties, air traveler security tax, luxury tax, provincial tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, business tax, and estate tax. Does that sound reasonable? That's what we're paying in taxes. Never before in the history of the world has a population been taxed at the level that we're taxed at that has not gone to war. It's never happened before. We're taxed higher than the slaves back in Greece, which only paid 25% tax on what they built. We're up around 40 to 45%, maybe 50, depending on what you earn.
Don't forget the home equity tax that's coming up.
And that's new, 100%.
Don't forget that the U.S. fought a revolution over a 2% tax.
Yeah, well, there you go. But we're going to have to, hopefully we don't have to fight a revolution. All we have to do is get our low-hanging fruit to join the group, and then we'll be fine. Because right now, numbers is what this game is all about. Everybody says, when are you going to call the referendum? Well, when I know I can win it. That would be, not, I said I mean we, sorry. But I mean absolutely that. Listen to this. China hits Canada with retaliatory tariffs on canola, oil, pork, and seafood. Okay, so how did that happen? Canada put a tariff on Chinese electrical cars. What for? Yes. What for? Why would they put a tariff on electrical cars? You don't think that they knew that the Chinese were going to come back and tax canola and peas? 50% of our crop here, probably. Is it 50% of the crop here? Probably. It is in Bonnyville. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to break you. What's the carbon tax all about? Why do I pay carbon tax? Because they want you to not have any money. If you understand what they're really thinking, and when it becomes abundantly clear what they're doing, you understand how hard you have to work and how fast you have to work to get this changed. Because that's the only path. 6 months ago, I thought, oh, you know what? Within Canada would be wonderful. And then I hang around with these guys, and I listen to what they're saying, and I'm thinking, it's impossible. There's just no way. There's only one path here. Okay, another thing. Red flag law, do you know what that is? The red flag law means if you have a gun or anything else and your neighbor sees it, he gets to do, like in every good communist country, report it to the police, and anonymously they will go to your house and seize whatever that is, and they will seize it first without you going to court, and then you'll have to go get your stuff back later. That's the way that is. This is legit. Broadcasting Act, online harms, you know that people are going to jail for online harm stuff in the UK, right now? And they're passing that bill in Canada right now. And censorship is something that's unheard of in Canadian history, and in my lifetime I never ever thought that we would have to be subject to censorship in Canada. But you know what the beauty of censorship is for them? You don't know you're being censored. Because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't ever see it, how the hell would you know you're being censored? So we have to trust them not to censor us, and I don't trust them. So that's basically where we're at with that. The other thing that's happening is that our crime rate's going through the roof. Anybody here in Valley View, they found this meth lab. It had 7,600 kilograms of chemical that is used to make methamphetamine. Or is it OxyContin? Fentanyl. All right, so that's what's happening there. How much fentanyl do you think you can make with that? Remember how much they said they caught at the border, going across the border, like virtually enough to hurt maybe 10 people. 7,600 kilograms probably makes enough to kill the entire population of the USA, the way I have figured. There's a lot there, because just a small amount of it is lethal. So what I'm saying to you is, that's not true that we don't have a fentanyl export problem. And that's only one place. There's several of them in BC that got caught, so that doesn't include the ones that didn't get caught. And how is it possible that importing that chemical into Canada is not against the law? It is everywhere else, but it's not against the law. There was a Bentley that they found in Australia full of fentanyl from Alberta. So just saying. We're being famous as the fentanyl exporting place of the world. Here we go. In his book, Values, Carney claims that Western society is morally rotten and that has been corrupted by capitalism. which brought about a climate emergency. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedoms. Industry and corporate funding. So rigid controls on personal freedoms and industry and corporate funding, which can lead to what? Poverty and breaking our people. And after all of that, assets will be stranded, used gasoline-powered cars will be unsaleable, inefficient properties will be unrentable, and he promises that. Does that not make you a little bit nervous? I know it makes me nervous. All right, digital ID, Dennis went into that. Here's something that I think very important. This is how the communists view gun control. All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can ever be used to command the party. Okay? Contrast that with the Americans who just finished fighting a war. This is a democratic view. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Being necessary to the security of a free state. I'll say it again. Being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. He wants to pull guns. He said in the French broadcast, he will come for our guns. What does that look like?
Communism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the problem. Gun control is not just gun control, it's property control. If they seize your guns, legally acquired property, it's the first step towards seizing everything else. There's no reason that you can actually, there's no other reason for it. A legal gun owner in Canada or in Alberta is 4 times less likely to murder somebody than the average citizen. So it's not about safety, no matter what they tell you. And the other thing is that they told us that they're going to confiscate long-range accurate rifles. So that's every hunting rifle, right? Because, I mean, define long range. For me, long range is 1,000 yards, but for the government, it's probably 150 or 200 yards. So that's the way they think. So the reason they don't want us to have guns is because they're planning to kill us and they don't want to get shot. So what do you think it's going to look like when they come to get those guns? First of all, they're going to ask for them, and most of the people in this room are not going to give them up. And then after that, you're going to become a criminal. So then they can go to your house, they can break your door down in the middle of the night, when everything's, whatever going on in there, and your kids are home, and they're going to throw you on the ground, and they're going to look for your guns, and they're going to grab your guns, and maybe throw you in jail. And that's what they're telling us they're going to do. And all we have to do is get on board with us, sign a petition, and we're going to take the first steps to stopping all of that. But we're not going to stop all of that unless you guys help us out. Because no matter what, when they say that we've got to have a face to this movement, one guy or one person is not going to rally 600,000 people or 1 million people. We need everybody to do it. It's going to be a collective effort. And it'll be a collective win. Just understand. It'll be a collective effort and a collective win. They allowed 2 million immigrants into Canada. It's stressing our systems beyond the max.
Mitch, fix the slide. That's $2 million a year.
It's $2 million a year. That's a brand new Edmonton every year. In Canada. Just understand the money and the infrastructure that's going to require to keep that up. Refugees are getting what, $75,000 or $80,000 a year to keep them here in Alberta. They come Alberta and Canada, and we're importing them 50,000 at a time.
And of course, they vote for the government that let it in.
Absolutely. If you really want change, you have to threaten it and mean it. And we have not got a choice in this. We have got to absolutely do that. And I've shared that with the Premier. I said, we will give you more leverage than you've ever had before to have this discussion, but they're not going to change anything. And she said, we'll take 6 months to do it. I said, 6 months? Well, it wasn't very popular in Bonneville. I'm going to tell you that. She actually got catcalled, and she's very popular in Bonneville. We were not very happy that she was going to try to repair this relationship that has been going on this way for 50, 60, 80, 100 years. It has not changed. They look at us as peasants. They look at us as the dirt under their feet because that's the way they treat us, right? You're not going to understand that they don't hate us by the way they treat us. So the romance between Canada and Alberta, just understand, they totally get what they're doing, and they totally treat you like they don't like you. So just understand that they really don't. So otherwise they wouldn't treat you that way. When do you think any of you growing up in this room would have ever thought as a child or growing up that our government would attack our biggest industry, so it'd put our people out of work? Is there anybody in the room that ever thought that was possible? I never did, absolutely. Power numbers, I'm going to say to you again, get people, sign up on APP. We need money. I'm not going to pretend that every grassroots group that I've ever worked with is broke. Like, not just poor, broke. We do this, we pay for our own gas, we drive up here to these places, we work really hard, we come here, and I'm asking you to work as hard as us. Like, I'm going to tell you, we've got 5 days off coming up, and then we do 10 town halls in a row, 10 nights in a row, all over Alberta. And I'll actually have some good news for you. Saskatchewan has actually got a group like APP, and they've asked me to speak with them in Saskatoon. So I'm going to Saskatoon on May 25th, and I'm going to speak to the Saskatchewan part of APP. So if you haven't suffered enough, ladies and gentlemen, it's your God-given right to suffer more. Thank you very much.
So how many of you guys found that inspiring, scary, but amazing?
What? I missed the most important part. I'm sorry. I can't believe I missed that. I want to vote. Do you agree, everybody in this room, that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? Yes or no? But here's the thing. Max, come up here. I want you to stand up. I want the Premier to see it. So we're going to take a picture. I want everybody that agrees with this to stand up, please.
Say hello to the camera.
Everybody say Alberta. Alberta. Thank you very much.
All right. So I want to do one quick introduction for this area before we get to the Q&A. And then I'll get the gentleman to come sit up here and we'll start the Q&A session. So what I'm going to ask for the Q&A is you stand up in the line. I reserved the first spot for Bonnie Michael just so that she could get up here. So she's going to ask the first question, but everyone just kind of line up just back behind this middle row here. And Max will get the microphone. But before we get that going, I want to introduce Patty Vold. So how many people in this room already know Patty? Patty, come stand out here a little bit. There she is. This is Patty, and she is our regional leader for Alberta Prosperity Project. So she will be helping lead the volunteers in this area. So if you want to help us out, you get in touch with this lady.
So also, I know there are people here from Millet and Wetaskiwin. I am also the regional director for that area. And if you're from Camrose, guess who you get? And those of you who want to ask about my last name, yes, we're related, but the only rodeos we do are in the back pasture. And the only thing we do with the auction market is bring cattle on Tuesday night and pick up the check on Wednesday.
So thank you, Patty. So please get in touch with her if you can help out. So I'm going to ask the gentleman to come and have a seat here. And like I said, you guys feel free to line up and we'll start the Q&A.
And the question that I have for the chiefs, and if you're talking to people in the local community, in and around Ponoka, the big question to ask the chiefs is, why are you so upset about $15 billion a year no longer going to Quebec that can stay in Alberta to, in fact, result in constitutionalized resource revenue sharing agreements with every First Nation in the province that would see your revenues quadruple from where they are now in terms of your relationship with the federal government. It would be a very simple thing to do in an independent Alberta so that everybody in this province could participate in the wealth of this province, and in the Indigenous communities of Alberta would finally be able to lift themselves out of the abject poverty and conditions that the government of Canada has kept them in. You know, and for those of you that live in Alberta, for those of you that farm in Alberta, you know, if you think that the Canadian federal government hates you, I can tell you, after litigating with the Canadian government for 34 years on behalf of Indigenous people of Alberta, they hate the Indigenous people of Alberta even more than they hate you, right? And that's the message that needs to get out, you know, to the Aboriginal community in Alberta. The other thing is, and I just want to finish on this note, because it was on this point, because it was really touching to me last night at our event in Calgary. A woman came out of the crowd to talk to me afterwards, and she just wanted to say, and she said it really quietly, you know, Jeff, I'm from a First Nation in Treaty 8. And I'm not going to say which one because I don't want to identify her. She goes, I followed your career your entire life. I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate everything that you've done for our people. And I know that you wouldn't be involved in something that would hurt our people. And I know that you are doing this because you believe in your heart that we will be better off in an independent Alberta than continue under the oppression of the federal government in Ottawa. And she strongly, this Treaty 8 First Nations woman strongly supports what we are doing, strongly supports Alberta independence, and is with us in both in spirit and in person. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. Thank you.
I want that broken up into a cycle, that very thing, and we'll put it online. Because we get asked that everybody.
So just to add one point for everybody, if you want to see that Indigenous policy that Jeff and other First Nations chiefs have drafted, just go to the website in the education section, hit the education tab at the top, and it'll take you to 3 documents. Look at the document that's proposed policies and governance of the sovereign nation of Alberta, and you'll see the section Indigenous people, and that's what Jeff and other First Nations chiefs have drafted. So it'll put writing to those words.
You betcha. So my name is Travis. I'm a fourth generation Albertan. I was picking rocks on the weekend. I've worked oil field all my life. So I want to believe in this movement. I really do. The blow that knocks you out is the one you don't see coming. All right. So there's good and there's bad with everything. We've heard talk about growing pains. What are some of those growing pains that we don't see coming that could be the Achilles heel to this movement? And how can we get ahead of them by identifying them so when they do get brought to life, they aren't a demon. They don't shut this movement down.
That is my number one biggest fear. So just understand that we're looking into that daily. We're asking people questions. What could possibly happen? I'm meeting with international lawyers this has happened in other countries. As a matter of fact, yesterday we had a meeting. We're looking at a line of credit so that we'll be set financially, so that everything doesn't stop on day 2. So the other thing that we're looking at is hopefully the provincial government is going to jump on this bandwagon and lead us down the path, and there would be absolutely no transition. That would be the other thing, and that's a message to the provincial government of Alberta. And while we're talking about that, I'm going to put my UCP hat on, and I'm going to tell you 65% of the UCP is in favor of this. 65% of their membership. However, any of you that don't have a UCP membership that are in favor of this, please go buy one. Let's make that 80 or 85% of the UCP that are going to be in favor of this.
I just want to add to that as well. You know, what's coming at us is a fear campaign, and all kinds of issues are going to be raised that are going to make people think twice about voting in favor of sovereignty. Now, we've been addressing these over the last few years, and on the website, again, FAQ, Frequently Asked Questions section, there are some 71 questions that we've already answered. But continuing on that, we're continuing to answer questions that come into the website, and we're diligently doing that. And I can assure you that we don't have all of the answers, but we have most of the answers, but we understand the process to deal with any of the concerns that may come before us, because we cannot anticipate, for example, exactly how the new government is going to handle, say, for example, the total national debt. We know what we are going to support, and that is that we have zero responsibility for the national debt. We've already contributed $800 billion, as I said earlier, so we should have no requirement to be involved at all. But this is something that the new government is going to have to negotiate amongst a bunch of other things. Any case.
Yeah, and just to add to that, too, I just wanted to say a lot of the concerns, and we really appreciate your question, by the way, a lot of the concerns that are being raised by the Federalist trolls, out there in the internet and wherever the hell they are just ludicrous. Like, my personal favorite one is, oh, yeah, Alberta, what are you going to do when we cut off your federal health transfers? Oh, yeah. Right? It's like, oh, well, don't you understand that you're going to have to answer the question, what are you going to do without our $70 billion a year and 26% of Canada's GDP? So I mean, a lot of the, the issues and a lot of the things they raise, are pure garbage, including this notion that somehow or other we're going to be landlocked, right? So, we already know that the day that Alberta becomes independent and we get rid of, the Canadian energy regulator, we're going to have 4 or 5 new pipelines to the United States. We're going to have a pipeline through Idaho and Washington to Tidewater. And if we want 2 or 3 more pipelines through British Columbia to the Pacific in British Columbia, we could have a nice discussion with the province of Alberta and the country of Canada as an independent nation state and say, hey, we want a couple more pipelines that go through British Columbia. And they go, well, no, we don't want to give them to you. It's like, okay, well, I guess because Alberta's a rat-free province, we're going to have to stop every train coming out of Vancouver at the Alberta border. We're going to have to inspect every single car for rats to make sure that you're not sending any BC rats through Alberta, right? And then we're going to also do an assessment. We'll have tax collectors go through every car. We'll figure out the value of all of the container goods, which is like 75% of Ontario's container goods, and we'll slap a 30% tariff on every tariff good that every container good that goes through Alberta. Or would you rather let us have a couple more pipelines? Oh, hell yeah. Right? That's the negotiating stroke that we'll have as an independent country, as opposed to a province on bended knee going to Ottawa saying, please, can we have some more of our money back? I mean, come on. Anyway, thanks.
Good one.
I wanted to address your question just a little bit more specifically to here, because I think part of the question that you brought up is really super important. Is we have to be very measured, and that it means like we have to get 1 million people to be measured and be critical thinkers and be calm.
And I don't help sometimes.
Yeah. But this is the thing, and so what we're asking when we're saying we're going to tip that pyramid upside down, that means every single person that is involved in this has to take personal responsibility for their actions, has to deal with on a personal level with integrity with each other, and don't believe anything that you see on social media. Yes, like we release our videos, obviously it's something that actually happened, but stop taking your messaging from there. Anything, if you're not talking and looking in someone's eyes and hearing what they actually have to say, and you hear something, either go find it out or ignore it. Just go find it out or ignore it. But, we are going to come across problems, and we just have to be, how do we get ahead of it? I don't know. I don't know if any of us actually have that answer, but I know that if we're, diligent and aware, and actually, like I said, dealing with truth and facts and just not letting ourselves get caught up in the fear, I think we'll be fine. And we'll be able to come up with solutions together in our small community groups, in our chapters, in our regions, and then in our province.
My name is John Reel. First of all, I want to thank the three of you for everything you've done to try and forward this movement to this stage. I admire your tenacity and your willingness to sacrifice personal time and treasure in order to accomplish this goal. The second thing I'd like to... The second thing I'd like to say is that you're new kids on the block. My wife and I were involved in the creation of the Alberta First Party more than 3 decades ago, and we advocated very strongly in Alberta as a political party to try and get the federal government back into their lane and allow Alberta sovereignty according to the existing Constitution of Canada. So this has not been a 9-year struggle, as you keep seeing in the news. This has been a decades-long struggle. It began in 1905, and it has gotten worse ever since, and it's the worst it's ever been now. So I really appreciate what you've done, and I say thank you for that. My first question is, how do we ensure that the referendum question is not mired in a local municipal election? How do we make sure that the question is just that question alone on the referendum? It isn't involved with municipal elections or anything else. How do we do that? I have one more question when I'm done.
I think Mitch has already spoken to this. And again, this for people that belong to other political parties, keep in mind you can belong to more than one, okay? But what we would really like from everybody in this room, please buy a UCP membership. We want to see UCP memberships going up along with APP memberships so that Danielle Smith and the people around her know that we are the UCP. We are her base, and we will control that party, and we will enforce the will of the people. We are not people to be governed. We're not to be told we're the government and we will tell you. It is our prerogative. It is our privilege. We're all done with that. So that's the short answer. And we need everybody to be writing their MLAs. We need everybody to be writing Premier Smith. And we need to tell her that we want a standalone referendum question, either in November of this year or early in 2026, whenever the conditions are most favorable to a yes referendum vote. And we insist on it, failing which we got rid of one premier, we can get rid of another one.
The second question is interesting. We know that there's going to be tremendous and significant opposition to this. The governments use fear as a motivator to stay in power, and they will use all the fear that they possibly can in order to prevent this referendum from being successful. And the second thing is that even if the referendum is successful, they will use whatever power of negotiation they have to delay, defer, and to try and eliminate the possibility of this. How do you feel about if, let's say we have a referendum with 65% in favor of independence. How do you feel, and how would we go about making a unilateral declaration of independence and seeking approval from the rest of the world?
Yeah, and I'll let Mitch and Dennis speak to this as well, but that's why we've been going down to the United States and meeting with the U.S. administration. We have a very strong sense that there are 3 statements that will be coming forward from the U.S. administration at the appropriate time. The first is that the United States of America supports Alberta's self-determination. The second is that the United States of America will recognize an independent, sovereign Alberta upon a yes referendum vote. And the third is that the United States of America will immediately enter into a free trade agreement with the independent nation of Alberta on the basis of a common market with 0 tariffs on all goods and services on both sides of the U.S.-Alberta border. So on that basis, and if you read sections 154 and 155 of the secession reference, I think it opens the door to Alberta to declare its independence from Canada and to insist in all negotiations with Canada, whether they claim it's under the Clarity Act or whatever, that we're negotiating with Canada state to state as an independent sovereign nation state, not as a province on bended knee, subject to whatever rules that Canada makes up to try to keep Alberta from becoming independent. And quite frankly, any issues that arise in those negotiations are probably best dealt with in the International Court of Arbitration in The Hague rather than in the Supreme Court of Canada. So that's the way that we're planning on moving forward.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's interesting, as Jeff sort of stated, but just to restate it again, international law does recognize the express will of the people through a referendum on sovereignty, and that's cemented when other countries acknowledge that new countries declared sovereignty. And the most recent example of that is February of 2008, when Kosovo, following a very successful referendum, declared its independence unilaterally. And can you guess which two countries first recognized Kosovo's sovereignty? One was Japan and Canada, right. So precedent has already been set. So you can see Canada is already in a straitjacket on this one.
So I can't add much to that, but I'm just going to tell you we're building a constitution, we're doing another Bill of Rights. Those things are already in the works. We're not against having a constitutional conference. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be an automatic thing that we have to do. We'll put in a temporary constitution and an election in 6 months is the way we're looking at it, 8 months, and the people will choose what they want for rights and freedoms and what they want for everything else. So this is all about you. You're going to have to participate, unfortunately or fortunately. I look at it as fortunately. And we're going to never, ever, ever allow what happened to us 2 years ago during COVID to happen to us again.
Hi, my name's Colin. I just want to echo the last fellow sentiments about the work you guys are doing. I've been following it pretty close, and you guys are doing an awesome job. The one question, well, more of a comment than a question, but I've been seeing a lot of stuff online, again, and I take it with a grain of salt, but I've been seeing a lot of comments coming up about us joining the states as the 51st state. And I don't know about you guys, but I see the Democrats getting back in power, and they're going to make Trump's pile of executive orders look about that thick, because they're going to reverse everything, and they're going to pile on 100 more to shove their agenda down everybody's throat. Their gender business and all that kind of crap. And we don't need that. We'll be in a spot 10 times worse than we are now.
So I would like to speak to that clearly and unequivocally. So when we went to the United States to do preparatory meetings for the full delegation from Alberta to go down and meet with the U.S. administration with regard to support for the U.S. independence. Then Dr. Modry and I went down together, and we were absolutely crystal clear with the United States that we were pursuing Alberta independence, not Alberta statehood. Okay? So the next thing that you need to hear in that regard is that the people we were meeting with fully understood that. They've read the polling in Alberta. They understand that within the independence movement in Alberta, that it's only the smallest portion of the independence movement in this province that support Alberta joining the United States. Okay? So they know that that's not what we're pursuing. And on top of it, they also understand that there's barriers on the U.S. side to Alberta joining the United States, including a 2/3 vote of the U.S. Senate, which would want to keep Alberta out because we're predominantly conservative, and it would mean 2 more seats likely for the Republicans were Alberta to join. So when Alaska and Hawaii came in, it was a trade-off. They traded conservative Alaska for Liberal Democrat Hawaii, and they figured it was a balance. We're not pursuing that at all. And you have my word on that was never on the table. Okay? And, for those people that are interested in pursuing U.S. statehood, what we say to those people, God bless you, right? You're fellow Albertans. You're also interested in Alberta independence. But, right, the first question is, do we want to leave Canada? We can't have a compound question, do you want to leave Canada and join the United States? Because that makes the question both hypothetical and conditional on U.S. agreement, and it would void the question under the Clarity Act. So we can't pursue it. So for those people that really feel that Alberta should become a U.S. state, just know that life is a journey. The first step is to Alberta independence, and then the onus will be on all the people wanting to pursue U.S. statehood to convince your fellow Albertans that that is the way to go. But quite frankly, I don't get the sense from this room that if we fight for 12 months to get ourselves out of the clutches of the CRA, none of us are going to be super anxious to be under the jurisdiction of the American Treasury and what used to be the Internal Revenue Service. So I think we all have a pretty clear path forward on this. And I've been saying as well, if you look at this as a breakup of a relationship, why would we get out of one country just to jump into a rebound country, right? Let's get our house in order. Let's truly enjoy the fruits of Alberta independence and move forward as a free and independent people, and that's the way we're moving forward. So thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen, for coming here tonight. My question is as to I may have caught a little bit of it, but I may have missed the whole message there. For drawing up a constitution, right? Do you guys have a rough draft? It may, and at the point when it comes right in there, constitution, and when you guys, how will you guys decide to put that together when the time comes? Are we going to have a constitutional convention? Are we going to have representatives from all over Alberta talking to their people and bringing their ideas forward? Okay. And second question would be, if we wait too long for this referendum, do we encounter the same problem that the third gentleman had brought up, where we keep on they might try to pump in more and more people from outside of Alberta here to affect that?
Yeah, as far as that goes, the answer to your first question is yes, there's going to be a constitutional convention. We're working on a draft. I mean, I'll tell everybody here roughly, that we're largely considering a model very similar to, the U.S. model, but with some elements of representative democracy from Switzerland brought in, so that people like us in a room like this will have far more input into government than we had previously, and make it much easier to get citizens' initiatives onto ballots, recall members of, the legislature, the Senate, the executive, etc., right? So that the people will govern, and the government won't be governing the people. Right? So, we're working on that. It's going to be ready to be circulated probably in a month or so. But, it's going to be, no surprises to people, a bicameral legislature with, a lower house, based on population. We're going to have a Senate based on region, so that the cities cannot, basically dictate to those of us who live in the country how we're going to live our lives, and have an elected executive and checks and balances. And then the big issue to be left open for the people of Alberta: do we want to be an independent constitutional republic within the Commonwealth, without a monarch, or do we want to split the head of state off from from the executive branch and have a separate head of state, like a governor general? Those are open questions for people to answer. I think people have feelings either way, and we're not the ones that are going to be deciding that. The people are going to be deciding that in the context of a constitutional convention immediately or soon thereafter of an independence vote, as we can arrange. So I hope that answers your question. There was a second question. Oh, was that one or both? I think I covered both. What's that? Oh, and then the referendum. As I said, I'm a trial lawyer, so I want to set early dates. If we have the momentum and think we can win in November of this year, that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a referendum on a clean question in 2025. And if we can rally our fellow Albertans, and if we can have 1.5 million people pledged to vote yes to that question by the fall of this year, then God bless us. We should have a referendum in November of 2025, and that's my goal.
I just want to make one comment here, just to emphasize a point. An interim constitution has been drafted and is currently being vetted. Like Jeff says, it's going to be released. Upon Alberta becoming a sovereign country the day after a successful referendum, then that interim constitution will serve a period of time while a full constitution is conducted with input from the public. So that's the way it will work. And it may take 6 or 12 months of diligent work to complete a full constitution with. And it shouldn't take very long to do the Bill of Rights, because we had it right before we gave it to the provincial government, who then screwed it up.
Yeah. So I just want to emphasize what Dennis just said. When Bill 24 was passed, and when we passed it at the AGM, we thought that we were going to have a constitutional type conference over our Bill of Rights. We thought we would bring it to all the people of Alberta. They would participate in that. It would be a real feel-good thing, nonpartisan thing. We would identify what we wanted for rights, but the government wanted nothing to do with that. So they passed something that actually did the opposite. We have less rights than when we started. That was totally against what we wanted, and totally flies in the face of what the membership wanted, because 95% of the membership voted for that change. And the other thing I want you to remember is one thing. I had a discussion with a bunch of gentlemen this morning. We were trying to fundraise, And I explained to them that we have 240,000 people. If everybody gets one, we have 500,000. And everybody gets one more, we have 1 million people, we're ready to go. It should take a week. Like, we shouldn't have to be screwing around here for 6 freaking months. Like, everybody gets one person, everybody gets another person. And if we get another one, well, they won't even take it to the polls because it's a done deal. So just understand, that's where we are. That's the amount of work we've done already. We're there. So we just have to make sure that we do that. 1, 1, and 1, and it's a done deal.
1, 1, and done.
Yes.
So thank you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more on the admin side to kind of help answer that. So yes, we did have about almost 20,000 people in the last 2. Well, we probably already had about 5,000 people signed up as volunteers in our database. And we were already working on trying to get in touch with those people. Of course, we're not going to make 20,000 phone calls to 20,000 people. We have 20 people, and we probably only 5 of those could probably help organize the other ones. So what we're doing is we are looking quarterly right now. We're going to be sending out probably email after email after email just to try to figure out where our regional leaders are. Because once we have a regional leader in every CA, because that's how we're splitting it around the province. Once we have a regional leader, that regional leader can build a team around them, and then it'll go down. So like I said, this is going to take probably, it's going to be more than a week. I will tell you that. But if you do get an email from us and you have volunteered, we will be in touch. And we, like I said, we are just looking for those leaders. There's actually areas where we have absolutely 0 people. And then we have an area like this where Patty's taking 3 CAs right now. Just so, because she knows a lot of the people in the area. So, like I said, if you have some leadership skills, some organized, we really need really strongly organized people that can, get people together and actually just delegate things. You don't even really have to do a lot except organize people. And that's what we're really looking for right now. So if you know those people, if you're one of those people, even just email us directly and just say, I want to be a regional leader. Otherwise, we're going to be sending out emails and hoping some people respond.
Hi, thank you for everything tonight. I just wanted to build on a point that Mr. Rath, you touched on, and that another gentleman brought forward, and that's things that can derail what we've got going on here. And one of those things that I see, and that shouldn't, in my opinion, be understated, is the Trojan horse of Pierre Poilievre running in the Battle River Crowfoot riding. And I just wonder if APP has an education strategy to make people understand I see the false sense of security as the biggest derailment of momentum, and I feel that the fear campaign that we witnessed in the last federal election and the momentum that it had, especially here in Alberta, and just the lack of understanding of how our federal system works is a real threat.
I'll happily address that because I've been dealing with the Pierre Poilievre issue for the last couple days. Some people are unhappy with me for saying this out loud, but as far as I am concerned, if you cannot stand up and say that there will be absolutely no more Alberta tax money going to Quebec, you are not an Albertan. Right? So what I say to Pierre Poilievre, if he's running in the rural riding of Battle River Crowfoot, Pierre, I have a slogan for you. The slogan is no more Alberta tax money for Quebec, and a dairy cow and milk cow and a micro dairy in every farmer's barn that wants one. I double dog dare you. So, as far as it goes, I mean, we need to remind people that Pierre Poilievre is actually part of the problem. He's a federal politician. I said it earlier. He wants us under his thumb, but he's just going to give us the odd little caress from time to time and wiggle his thumb from side to side, as opposed to just crushing us the way the Liberals do. He's no better than a Trudeau Liberal if he cannot stand up and say that there will be no more transfer payments coming out of Alberta, and he has no business running in this province. I can't say it more clearly. Thank you.
Just one thing I want you to understand. There is no false sense of security here. So just understand that. We are not absolute. I've been doing this for a year and a half. It took me over a year to get 37,000 signatures. So just understand how hard that was. 100 town halls, some halls 40, 50, 60 people. I totally understand that we have the easiest 250,000 signatures now. The tough ones, we have to get the rest. Those are going to be the tough ones. So there's no false sense of security here. However, that being said, let's just go out there and do it and see how close we can come. And then we're still very successful at where we're at, and we can still make major changes, but we need to absolutely do that. I really will be happy to see that happen for us to get over 1 million pledges, but I'm not taking it for granted by any stretch of the imagination, just so you understand that.
One more comment about Mr. Polyev. Remember, he also said he wasn't in favor of Alberta taking control of the pension plan either.
Yes, I remember that.
So again, and that's the strength of the Alberta Prosperity Project, because we are an educational society, and it is our job, once we get our leaders in place, when you're having your community meetings, when you're gathering like this, even in smaller groups, that we're having these discussions. And we have to stop being afraid to talk to people. We have to stop being afraid about talking about politics, about talking about our religion, about talking about all the things that we were told for my whole childhood anyway, that were impolite things to speak about in public. And we just have to talk about them again. We have to make it normal to have these conversations. We shouldn't be, having to come to a special occasion in a special room to talk about this. So it's about personal accountability and integrity and just opening up the conversation. You're not going to drag anyone along with you, but you can bring people along, and sometimes they're feeling the same way you do, and if you don't talk about it, you're never going to know.
One of the things I want you to think about is many people say to you when you're talking to them, I'm not interested in politics. Well, you have to remind them they may not be interested in politics, but politics are sure interested in them. And if they don't want to be involved, then they're going to suffer the consequences of decisions they don't make. That's one thing. The other thing is consider the federal election. A third of the population didn't vote. In the provincial election, 38% of the Alberta population didn't vote. Interestingly enough, the majority of those people are conservatives. But they're frustrated and they're angry. They don't feel as though their vote counts. They're jaded. And they're too busy looking after their businesses or their livelihoods or their families to get involved. These are the people that will, if you can help us convince them, will put this over the line. The NDP, the socialists, they all vote. Just think about that.
Just one more point on that point as well. Everybody needs to remember in that last election, there's a big conservative vote out there that couldn't stomach voting for some of the candidates that were running in the last election. Yes. Like, if you were in Calgary and you were told to get off your couch and go vote for Jason Copping or Tyler Shandro after they locked us up in our homes and destroyed our businesses and treated us the way that they treated us, who was going to get off the couch and go vote for those people? We were united conservatives in those constituencies. We united in our disgust with the candidates that were being run in those constituencies, and we were united in staying home. So, and that's a big lesson for this party. They've got to remember that they've got to run candidates that support what the base wants and not continue to run these Jason Kenney, Trudeau liberals that hate us.
Hi, I'm Brad. Thanks, Vicki, and I appreciate all you guys with all the hard work you guys have been doing. Anyways, one question: you say you're going to stop our tax money going to the east, and since we got most of our banking systems across the country, I'm curious how you're going to try and restrict that with business taxes, etc., personal taxes. Second question: it's a little bit off the topic. But we know there's a lot of people that are compromised by China and whoever, so we can pick out a whole lot of different politicians, Trudeau and Carney too. So is the U.S. going to come up here and get rid of the Chinese one way or the other, whether we're independent or not? That'd be something I'm curious about. Maybe you've heard something, and thank you very much, guys.
Well, certainly one of the issues and one of the reasons I think that the United States is in such big support of Alberta independence is they see it as a way of securing North American energy supply and keeping North American energy supply out of control of the communist Chinese that have completely infiltrated the federal Liberal Party, right? So, there's no doubt that all of these policies that restrict Alberta oil and gas production that have come out of the Trudeau Liberals, were designed to harm the North American energy supply and weaken the United States and Canada. And who does that benefit? It benefits Chinese global hegemony, and we all know it. So, obviously, that's one of the reasons that we believe that the U.S. administration is so strongly in favor of supporting Alberta independence. With regard to, your other questions on currency and so on, we have people that are a lot smarter than I am in the areas of finance that actually run banks and run financial institutions here in Alberta. We're going to be working with them over the next couple of months to explore the ability to put, like at least $500 billion worth of credit swaps in place that would be available to Alberta to transition us to a new economy or to a new currency and a new fiscal arrangement following independence. Some of the things that we put on the table for consideration with the U.S. administration are things like converting Alberta assets and savings at par from the Canadian dollar into U.S. dollars. That's, one of the things that we're trying to get assurances from, in our discussions with the U.S., and so on. So that's when, our broader delegation that'll be going down to Washington comes back. We're hoping to have answers to all of those questions that we can share in town halls across the province. Obviously this is a work in progress, but I can tell you, and Dennis can, corroborate this, the support we received, from the United States with regard to our, preliminary visit to Washington, D.C. was overwhelmingly positive, and the calls that I'm getting every day from the United States are also overwhelmingly positive. And I can assure everybody at this room that what we're doing and what we're working on here is known to the highest level of the U.S. administration, the highest level. So anyway, thank you for your questions.
My corroboration comment is simply this on our first part of our discussion. From the administration, the U.S. administration, we are very strongly in support of Alberta sovereignty. That absolutely is true.
Thanks. My name's Dean. I thought I was last. My last name starts with Z, but here we go. Someone else. This question is probably not timely just yet, but the question I have is, given the fact that we're working towards spreading this, do you have any sense of how you're doing with the cross-cultural, recent immigrant, the whole business of people of a variety of situations? Because I'm rural and I look around here and I see pretty much what I see. I do a little bit of online work with kids from Calgary, but I'm just curious if you have any perspective on how you're attacking that and how it's working.
Actually, we see the support in all communities in Alberta as being extremely strong. There's a lot of energy in and around this. And let's face it, new Canadians have the same issues that a lot of us have. Like, do you want to be free from federal regulation? Do you want to be free from income tax, all the other taxes? We have a very strong message, and that message is built in and around hope for the future and building the strongest economy possible for our children and grandchildren. And that's why we're doing this. So, there's always more work to be done. We're doing lots of outreach into numerous communities across Alberta, and that work will continue as we get ready to move towards the referendum.
Yeah, just to add to that, we do have support from multiple different ethnic communities.
Alberta Prosperity is nonpartisan. Just telling you. Real Alberta Prosperity, not just the name of the project. Alberta Prosperity appeals to everyone. So just understand that if everybody has more money, NDP, wherever you vote for, you'll appreciate 20 or 25% more of spending money every month.
Yeah, so the tagline for the Alberta Prosperity Project, and I don't know if you all know this, it's freedom and prosperity through independence. So that's it. That's the tagline.
My name is Jan Voorbij, and you guys, you gave me some hope, but you can give me more hope when you give me some signs that we go back to our moral foundations, to the Judeo-Christian principles where our country is built on. I mean, when you think about that debate and they ask the so-called Prime Minister how many genders there are, and he cannot answer that, then I think, where are we? Please, give me some more hope.
Thank you for that. And notwithstanding my earlier blasphemy, which I'll again apologize for, I am so sorry. We wholeheartedly believe the way that you believe, and that whatever we do needs to be built on a very strong moral Judeo-Christian foundation, and we thank you for that question. Thank you.
What I'd like everybody to do in answer to this question, in the frequently asked question section, there's a question: why do we promote the supremacy of God? And there's a beautiful answer to that, why we support the supremacy of God. You might be interested to know that Mr. Legault in Quebec is working diligently to eliminate religion in the province of Quebec. Yes. This is coming very real. You know, the kind of thing that's occurring there, that secularism, you know, could spread. We have to be able to stand up, because as you know, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for everything. And that's what's been happening. So we need to stand up for God.
Okay, so just let's go back to the Alberta Bill of Rights. Brian Peckford sent me an email, and he said you have to base the Alberta Bill of Rights on Judeo-Christian principles. So I went there, and I spoke to government about basing it on Judeo-Christian principles. I asked my MLA to amend it, even to get them to say no, but they said no before we even start. They said they would not do it. The UCP government of Alberta said they will not base the Bill of Rights on Judeo-Christian principles. They would not do that because it's a political risk. I don't believe it's a political risk. It's more than Judeo-Christian. It's a set of values that the entire Western civilization was built on. So it's more than just Judeo-Christian. That's part of it. But the fact is that our government that we have in power right now refused to do that. And I asked them specifically.
And atheism always borrows on the Bible, always.
Okay, this is going to be the last question, and then I think these guys will be here probably not too long, but they'll probably stand around for a couple more questions if you want to come talk to them after.
Good evening. Thanks very much. My name is Jeff. Two questions, or two points. One is that God is mentioned in the Canadian Constitution. So why would and the Declaration of Independence? So why would that not be part of our future Bill of Rights?
It would be. Well, it would be. There's no issue.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we're not here to argue.
Yeah. And for the question, have you thought about, or is there a real risk of financial institutions not allowing further investment into the province or the sovereign nation of Alberta? Is there a risk of that? And if there isn't a risk of that, for financial institutions either invest in businesses or in personal houses or various properties, if there isn't a risk, has that answer been created to respond to the fear-mongering of the media?
I honestly do not believe that there's any risk in that regard. And the reason for it simply is that the biggest problem an independent Alberta is going to have when we establish a flat 10% personal income tax rate, a flat 10% corporate tax rate, and have the lowest tax rate of any regime in North America. Well, every corporation in North America knows that we're going to be the most stable regime in North America to invest in, because we're going to be out of the Paris Climate Accord. There's going to be no more silly ideas that we're going to tax people or businesses to change the weather, you know, the same way that the ancient Mayans Canadians thought that they could, right? All of that's going to be gone. So the biggest issue with Alberta is that there's going to be a shortage of office space in downtown Edmonton and downtown Calgary, as all the corporations in North America that want to invest in Alberta and bring money into Alberta are going to be flooding our cities and flooding our province with money, investing in new projects in Alberta that have all been squelched and killed and put on hold by all the Marxist carny economics that have been ruining this province under Trudeau, for the last 10 years. Because let's not forget, Carney was Trudeau's chief economic advisor. So, your question, is there a risk? No, because there's also going to be countless U.S. financial institutions that are going to happily want to invest in a free Alberta, if for some reason RBC, TD, and everybody else wants to pull out, which is beyond unlikely. So, I think we're going to be fine in that regard. And as I said, we're working diligently to make sure that, the new, independent Alberta is going to have between $500 billion and $1 trillion line of credit set up with the U.S. Treasury in credit swaps that are going to be available, to ease any growing pains through transition. All pensions are going to, if Canada tried to cut off pensions, which they won't or they can't legally, they can be entirely self-funded through Alberta. Again, we're not going to be sending $70 billion a year to Ottawa. We're going to have more than enough money staying in Alberta, to cover off any of these, costs and liabilities in the short term. So, we don't see any financial risk in that regard. So thank you for the question.
Just, if I may.
Hang on, I want to add to that question. In a very simple fashion, business always locates to the least regulated, least taxed, and freest economy in the world. It always does that. And here's the evidence in Alberta. In the 70s, Alberta was booming, all right? There was a massive demographic shift of people and businesses from elsewhere in Canada and around the world to Alberta. Why? Because of liquid gold. And it wasn't taxed. There was no NEP up until 1980. But there's tangible evidence of what happens when you have a low-tax, low-regulated environment for people and businesses. So there's the evidence, and and I know, and everybody in this room knows that business will relocate to the least regulated, taxed region in the world. What's your next question?
So, just to add on that, I agree 100%. Sorry. I agree 100%. The thing that triggers with me, or looking at the last 5-10 years in Alberta for oil companies to get loans from Canadian financial institutions, they've been punished, intentionally punished, and it probably goes beyond Alberta, but there's that pettiness and punishable mentality that is directed from the federal government and all the institutions that spawn from that or that are connected to it, whether it's through the World Economic Forum or whatever. Anyway, so just to feed on that.
Yeah, we're going to constitutionalize an end to ESG in Alberta. There's going to be no more of this, and we're moving forward as a free and independent country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you want one more?
Okay. I'll be the last person I have to deal with tonight. Sorry. First of all, I'd like to say thank you all very much for what you're doing here. Much respect and much appreciation from you. My name's Tracy Worthington, and I've been here in Alberta a very, very long time. I'm from England originally, and I have seen my country deter rapidly because of the influx of people they have continued to bring into the country illegally. Because we have this, what's called with the European Union, an open border policy, which does not work whatsoever. And I've spoken up about this, and I've tried to let people know how serious this problem is, and I've been called some terrible things. So my question is, with bringing people in who wish to be Albertan, I'm one of them. I work hard, and I'm proud to be a hardworking Alberta girl. However, we have to be extremely careful when people come in illegally, as we've seen with the Trump administration. A lot of them have gone back to El Salvador with the MS-13 gang members. So my question is, who is going to police this, and how are we going to keep a check on it, because once this happens, this is like a forward momentum. And in England now, the country is in absolute chaos. The police do nothing. They don't want to do anything because they don't want to be called a certain word, which is just out of control. Thank you. Thanks.
Obviously, a free and independent Alberta is going to have strong borders and strong immigration laws. So thank you for the question.
Yep.
You know, Quebec already controls its immigration. It's in the purview of each provincial government to control immigration. Quebec is the only province that actually does it. And why our premier doesn't do it is beyond me. Yeah. But I think at some point she's going to have to. Something that's quite relevant, in the Quebec secession referendum in 1995, in order to be eligible to vote, you had to be a citizen of Canada, i.e. Quebec at this time, to be able to vote. And so one of the questions for the government when the referendum is called is, will Danielle Smith and the UCP government do the same thing and limit the number of people who can vote to people who have been living in the province of Alberta for 5 years or greater?
Okay, one more question. All right. One more. For sure last.
Sorry, my name's Pam. Just right here? Okay. Right there? Okay. Inside my cheek. Okay. So you guys keep talking about how much money each person in Alberta is going to not have to send to the federal government. It's going to save us anywhere from 15, 20, 25, 30. Do you actually have some real numbers somewhere? Because I think if I could share that with some of my friends, that would be really a good place to start.
The short answer to your question is that we do. We're actually going to have advertising that shows, pre-independence paychecks, pay stubs, post-independent pay stubs, all of those numbers. The problem is we're on a sliding scale. So, basically tax savings, depending on your income level, are going to range from 20 to 50%, right? And then, Mitch and I were talking about it today. If you have a married couple that each have their own income of $90,000 a year, their actual tax savings to that family is going to be $40,000 a year. Think about that. And then think about seniors poverty in Alberta and the struggle that all of us have had, including myself, taking care of aging parents and having to pay to take care of our moms and our dads and the rest of it. All of that disposable income that's going to be added back into your pocket, because it's not going to $15 billion to Quebec and all money here, there, or wherever. It's going to stay in Alberta so we can take care of our families and take care of our parents and take care of our kids. So that's why we're doing this. We're trying to make this a better place for all of us and all of our families. And the savings are real, and the amount of money that's going to stay in everybody's household and in your personal bank accounts is real. It's not notional. And we can provide sliding scales and numbers and all the rest of it. It's all worked up, and a lot of it's actually on the APP website now, I think is what Dennis was going to say.
Yeah, I was going to give you a specific example. The average worker in Alberta makes $78,000 a year. If you strip away all the taxes that were on the board that Mitch identified, you take away all of the taxes, the actual purchasing power is around $31,000 to $35,000. So if you consider that the person is paying all those taxes, is what I'm trying to say, is that their actual purchasing power is $31,000. If you strip away all of those taxes, that person's purchasing power is in the order of $68,000 to $70,000. What a difference. Okay, we've done that calculation by eliminating the average taxes for a person making $78,000.
All right, well, I want to thank these gentlemen once again for coming out and answering all our questions. I have a couple Alberta license plates for Mitch and Dennis here, from Gary here, who has decided to donate those to them so they can put those on their trucks. I also encourage every single one of you, if you have not already, to go to our website, albertaprosperity.com, and register your intent to vote yes. And when you're feeling really, really bad and really, really sad and you're feeling a little hopeless, find that picture in your phone of that really special person that makes you smile and that you're fighting for.